I wanted to get some insight on how the economic and human tolls can be reduced. I talked about it with Marcus Oxley via Skype. He's the head of an organization which works to reduce the impact of disasters.
You've got a huge continent there which is beset by a whole range of natural disasters. So you've got a coastline which is vulnerable to cyclones. You've got seismic zones which cross the area. You've got areas affected by droughts, areas affected by floods. So, that very much is part of the mix of life in India, and particularly when we bear in mind that the official statistics tend to record the large scale, the mega disasters that get the media attention, but actually the vast majority of losses are usually the small scale, very localized disaster losses, which actually don't get into the official records, don't get the national government attention, certainly don't get the international media attention. So it very much is part of everyday life in the Indian subcontinent. We tend to call them natural disasters because it's usually triggered by a natural phenomena like an earthquake or a flood or a tsunami or a drought or a cyclone, which is very much a physical event. But the conditions that people live in, the poverty, the vulnerability that people live in, that's very much a part of our development processes.
You rattled off a number of natural disasters, so we've kind of touched on that. Are there different ways to prepare for each, or are there lessons that can be divined from each natural disaster that kind of apply generally?
Yeah, yes, I think so. I mean, I think one of the keys to really good disaster management is really trying to understand and learn the lessons from these crises, and try to understand, well, if that same event were to happen again in the near future, what would we do differently? Better early warning systems, better response procedures, access to tools and equipment to search and rescue, the ability to know who to contact, who to communicate, where to put the injured people, where to bury the dead people. I mean, all these things are part of the kind of real life experience of disasters.
We've been talking rather generally about disasters. I'd like to focus back in on Nepal and earthquakes specifically. I grew up in California, so I've weathered quite a few moderate major earthquakes, and I tell you, it does a number on you psychologically. It messes with your equilibrium. It does a number on the mental side of things, in the respect that there are aftershocks, and you know they're coming, and some of them are moderate. And talk to us about the difficulty of dealing with that, not just as a resident, but the people trying to provide aid.
Well, that's right. I mean, what we're hearing stories coming through now after this second earthquake in Nepal, that there is a genuine fear amongst the population, and I think this is where one of these things, in terms of what can we learn from this, how can we sit down with populations and understand how to make people feel better prepared, better able to respond, to better understand really what the risks, what the vulnerabilities, what the exposure is. I think this is part of the healing process. This is part of getting people to get back to normality, and getting people to understand that actually there's many things that they can do which can genuinely reduce the risk of these earthquakes. So I think part of this, of drawing out the lessons learned and using that to build a better, more safer society, is part of that healing process. So I think the two things go hand in hand.